lifestyle, because of the exposition here, the level of radiation, because I'm electrosensitive, I'll not even be able to use my laptop even without the power cable. And usually I can use that without the power cable, but it also emits electromagnetic radiation. So going back to the paperwork, which is easier, but again, my brain also, so if I'm a little bit incoherent in certain points, concentration is a little difficult for me at the moment as well. So I should do my best. So basically I'm just presenting today on a subject which is close to my heart. It's something I've done an awful lot of research on. I'm not an expert by any sense of the word, but being electrosensitive, it compelled me to find out what was happening to my body and why. And also from the perspective of doing the integral yoga. My husband and I, we both practice integral yoga in France. There was an element of the suppression of consciousness that just kept coming to me, and as I was watching videos and observing the very few people that I now see, I realized, well, something came to me to say, okay, there's a connection here between why people are less conscious these days, why there seems to be such a dumbing down of society, if you like, which is why I titled the talk, The Age of Stupid. I made my own t-shirt. So I'm just going to play a short cartoon, because this I found just recently, and it kind of expresses to me how I feel as an electrosensitive person in this world which is just saturated with mobile phones. I'll just play you this little cartoon. More or less expresses exactly how I felt when I was travelling to India and travelling through Paris. I had to go on the metro like this, keeping my head away from people. This is what I feel like. This is exactly how I feel when I'm in amongst a crowd, when I'm observing people and just see this sea of black, shiny objects. And everybody has one in their hand, can't put it down, and well, the consequences of which we'll see in the not too distant future, I'm sure. So, as I mentioned at the start, I'm electrosensitive. I won't talk about that now because the video from Professor Ollie Johansson, he actually explains very well electrosensitivity, but I will go into it a little more detail after the video. But it does, being electrosensitive does impact so much of your life. In the last 4 or 5 years since I began to develop it to the point where I am now, which is really quite sensible, even to fluorescent lights and certain electrical appliances. It's not just a health effect, there's a social aspect. Being a social person, Srini knows, I was always, when I lived here, I've always been involved with people. My work throughout my career has been involved with people. I was in the bank for 14 years, I was in customer service, restaurants, bars, always surrounded by people. And even with my art, I was always surrounded by people. My shop here, involved in the arts, with the classes with the children. So it's not just a physiological problem, it also does have a psychological effect, but not in the sense of how most people that I come across, I say most, not all, but the majority of people, when you mention electrosensitivity, including my own doctor, there is so much ignorance on the subject. She basically said to me one day, it doesn't exist. But it does, because my husband is one of the only 2 people in France that's been recognised as disability because of hypersensitivity. So for my doctor to not support me, not ask a single question, but how does it affect your health? Something is wrong. Something is very wrong in the system. So you might be wondering, well, if I'm so sensitive to all this electro smog, how come I'm taking a trip to India and come through on a train, a plane, the airports, into the land of what I call the cell towers, because it's even worse here than it is in France. I mean, in France we have, to date I think, something like 75,000 cell towers in France alone. There's a website where you can actually see where all the cell towers are, and that number has doubled in the last 5 years since we started to look for a house, which is quite sad. It wasn't my will to come to India. When I left 5 years ago, I wasn't sure if I was going to come back because of my problem developing. As I say, I practice integral yoga, and just 2 months ago there was this strong, I say it's a feeling, it's more an intuition, it's a calling, I must come. I didn't know for what reason at the time. I asked, okay, if I'm supposed to go, but please give me a real sign. And the day after, the first thing I see on the internet when I'm just checking some YouTube channels is Incredible India advertisement. So I said, okay, well, not that I'm not believing you, Mother, but please, just one more sign, please, and then I'll know for sure. So the next day I get another video of one of my channels I subscribe to, and she'd done a trip to India on archaeological discovery, so okay, I give in. When I searched for my tickets, I just keyed in some dates to find a price. Only after did I realise the date I put in was Orville's 50th birthday. And then the date I travelled, again without thinking, was Mother's birthday, the 21st of February. So that's the reason I'm here, and I have goosebumps talking about it, so I know that's the truth that's coming through. So I'm going to give you a definition of consciousness, because whilst the video I'm going to show details the health effects, I don't need to go into that because it tells everything that you need to know in the video. But what I wanted to add from my perspective is what I've begun to observe and sense from a consciousness point of view, in that I feel that there is a force behind this drive to cover the earth in Wi-Fi that is not, shall we say, of this earth. It's not physical, although there are people, puppets, you know, directing everything in its course. It's coming from a force much deeper than that, which is what Mother would have termed the Agnos force, the Lord of falsehood, the Lord of nations even, which when we think of United Nations, one world government, all points to the same, for me, it all points to the same background that's pushing and pushing at the moment to create as much chaos as possible. So, definition of consciousness in the Collins Concise English Dictionary is alert and awake, not sleeping or comatose, aware of one's surroundings, one's own thoughts and motivations, denoting or relating to a part of the human mind that is aware of a person's self, environment, and mental activity, and that to a certain degree determines his choices of action. So the term consciousness, it's not simply related to spiritual matters. To be conscious is not necessarily just to be spiritual. To be conscious is to be aware of everything around you, the smallest details, how what you say, what you think, what you feel actually affects other people because of the vibrations, and also how other people think and feel, how their vibrations affect you. So consciousness is not just about spiritual awareness. The Mother said in the agenda, the conditions in which men live on earth are a result of their state of consciousness. So if we are in a state that we're feeling depressed, oh, I don't have enough, this is a terrible world, it's our own fault, actually, because we're not connecting, we're not making that effort to connect with self to start with. And by connecting with self, obviously we connect with that, the source. So should then a conscious being not do what they can to maintain a safe and sound environment for themselves, to create the optimum environment to not only develop physiologically on a physical level, but also to develop, especially in Oroville, the nature of the source of the birth of Oroville being the mother, should we not be trying to be conscious of these things, because by being conscious of all these things that are being hit at us from side to side in various directions, not just from the electromagnetic radiation, but from other sources as well. We should be really conscious of all of this and take all of it into consideration. So it's one thing to take good food, take exercise, but we need to keep our minds healthy, because if our minds are not healthy, if our brains are not clear, there's no way that we can connect. Because it's the mind that controls the intuition. When the intuition comes, it's a sense, but it's the mind that translates that sense into something we can understand. Now, if our brain is foggy, this connection is lost, so we're not able to understand the intuition, and maybe not even sense the intuition in the first place. So the effects of electromagnetic radiation being that which is used and emitted from cell towers, from cell phones, from cordless telephones in the house, from Wi-Fi especially, and even from baby monitors, cordless baby monitors. It's having a detrimental impact on the health of humans, and not just humans, it's having a detrimental effect on all life. For example, one of the reasons why we don't get much signal, or difficult to get signals in the Oroville region, is because of the forest. Now, it's not a case of, oh, I can't get a signal on my phone, this is really painful. It's because the trees are actually absorbing that radiation. The trees are protecting us. As nature is protecting us for a reason. We need to understand that as well. Even in Europe now, the bees have been found, scientifically proven, to be dying from Alzheimer's, which is a disease that many humans are now dying from, especially in Europe. In England, it's the highest source of death, the highest reason for death, above cancer and above all these other diseases. It's the highest rate of the cause of death now in UK alone. I think also in America it's coming up towards that. So the fact that the bees are dying of Alzheimer's should really give us a signal, because they're becoming an endangered species. We are causing that with our ignorance, and our cell towers everywhere, and our cell phones everywhere, and our Wi-Fi everywhere. Without the bees, we can't pollinate plants. We can't pollinate plants, we can't grow food. So many people are saying once the bees die, we have a serious problem growing food for ourselves. Now obviously there are other departments there being puppeteered by this adverse force like Monsanto that come up with a solution. Okay, we've got some GMO food, it doesn't need this and it doesn't need that. And now it's also, it can grow, it doesn't matter about the aluminium that's falling from the skies, because they're resistant to that. Our GMO food will grow in any condition. So that's their solution. Instead of solving the problem from the roots, giving us a clean environment, they just want to put more and more and more of these poisons on top of it. But that's another subject which I think I need 6 months if I was going to cover all the topics that are going on at the moment. So this saturation of electromagnetic radiation through all this wireless technology, it's affecting our mental capacities, and it's affecting our physical makeup, our physical structure, our cellular structure, and it's affecting our consciousness. Only most people are so absorbed in the technology that they're not even able to see, they're so addicted to it. And I use the word addicted because it is an addiction. So this is why I've used the phrase the age of stupid, because people are just totally unaware, and not all are unaware through ignorance. Many hear and see and watch things about how dangerous these things are, just refuse to accept it. So when I use the word we, when I'm talking about human beings, but also I'm talking about people who are electrically sensitive, because we feel these effects, and I feel very lucky to be electrosensitive. Although it's difficult, I feel blessed, because it's given me the opportunity to keep away from the thing. It's given me the opportunity to make sure that I stay in the same environment where I can develop, just physically and spiritually. So what we're witnessing as a result of all this saturation, all this use of the technology, is a decline in common sense. We've seen a decline in courtesy, compassion, empathy, patience, harmony, goodwill. We've seen a decline in all of these things, as that short clip just explained very, very clearly. In fact, we're seeing a lack of all the aspects of the mother generally around the world, which is quite sad. So, I mean, we're already on this earth, we come to earth, we're already disconnected beings in that we've been disconnected from our source. Our souls are hidden away, all tightly packed, waiting to come out. We're here as human beings to re-establish that connection. That's what our job is, that's what we've been put here for, that's the divine play, that's the divine's wish. He wanted to manifest something so that he could experience his self through us, and for us to then, through that experience, to reconnect. But without the clear mental capacities, without clear thought, without clear reasoning or clear concentration, without a clear antenna, which is our pineal gland of the third eye, then how can we know through intuition? How can we feel this intuition when it's the brain that deciphers this for us, as I explained before? Without a clear mind, how can we possibly reach the goal of transformation for which we are here as human beings? How can we bring down that into this if we're not able to even just sense a small part of it? So, what I just want you to remember as we go into this presentation, and I say this because I'm here in Oroville, and this is the place where this should be understood, is I want you to remember Mother's work, because this is an integral part of why Oroville is here, why the people of Oroville are here, because of Mother's consistent work for at least 90 years, and she began at the age of 5, so at least 90 years she'd begun to develop her own reconnection and her consciousness, but especially for the last 17 years, which is all documented in the agenda, was her work on the cells, the mind of the cells, the consciousness of the cells. And when you watch this video, you'll understand just what an impact this technology is having on our cells, which the mother described as little people. So we're full of thousands and thousands of little people who are also suffering greatly from this radiation. So one of the things that she spoke about being essential for progress, essential for the work that we do as a part of integral yoga, is in order to begin our work, we need to be able to establish peace in the mind, peace in the body, and peace in the sensations or emotions. And the electromagnetic radiation is disturbing all of those things. Whether you're conscious of it or not, it is having an effect. So, if we can't acknowledge this basic need, and if we can't acknowledge the work of Mother in this regard, then it's like saying that she's wasted her time. All the speaking she did, all the writing she did, all the listening and sharing that she's done over all these years, hour upon hour in concentration on her cells, working for peace in the mind, peace in the body, peace in the sensations. If we can't acknowledge that fact, it's like saying that we don't believe in her. Now, I believe that she sent me to give this message because it's essential if we are to grow, and it's essential that people are aware and can take precautions with regards to this technology, especially in Oroville. And I understand the reasons why in Oroville people feel it's so important that they must have their mobiles, they must be able to connect because of safety. Yes, that's an issue, but there must be, after almost 50 years, some other solutions that we can bring about that don't involve this kind of technology, because after all, we've all managed to live without it up until this point. So with that, we're going to watch the video now, which will explain the health effects, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the consciousness side. It's a long video. Please be patient. It's very interesting. Yeah, most of the audience are from Yatra, so. Well, I'll continue because it's good practice. So, remember Professor Johansson, he was talking about the extent, the magnitude of the amount of the radiation that we're exposed to now was 10 million, billion times higher. And he said it was 10 with 18 zeros. That's what it looks like on paper. 18 zeros, yeah, it was mentioned. To hear it is one thing, but to see it actually written down with the number of zeros, I had difficulty fitting it on the paper. Imagine that you start off with 10 rupees, and then you multiply, and that's your bank balance afterwards. Can you imagine having that many rupees in your account? Nobody can. I don't think even the richest of the rich in India have that much money in their accounts. So that's the extent of the multiplication of what you're exposed to. It's coming through your bodies, it's coming through the walls, it's just everywhere. There are hardly any places now you can go where you're not saturated. We're privileged to stay here at Yatra because despite the fact that we do have mobile phone tower in new creation, which is huge monster, and now it used to be one, but there are 3 now in Pudapalayam, plus all the bits in between, the Wi-Fi in the restaurants, all the way along the road, beating out everywhere you go. Here, I've used my smog meter. I have an electro smog meter that I carry with me everywhere. Not that I can't sense radiation, but like now I'm saturated, so my body's already painful. Nerve pains, headaches. This at least allows me to search for a place that is reasonably safe for me to stay when I'm travelling. For instance, at the airport, I can use this. I know it's bad because everybody's using cell phones, everybody's searching the internet, there's Wi-Fi everywhere, but at least I can find a place where there are no people, usually right at the far end of the airport. I have to walk a long, long way just to find a spot where I can sit where there are no people. And this just confirms to me at least I'm protecting my body by making sure I put myself in a place that is not fully radiating all the time. So that's the figure that we're given. So see, it's difficult to find videos to show to people because there is so much information. It's difficult to find and compile all of that information into one spot. So if you're not aware of anything about electromagnetic radiation, it's where do you start? So Professor Johansson is an expert in his field and he has covered everything. He's got many videos, many presentations. This one I found to be the most easy to understand in terms of a layperson who's not really heard about electrosensitivity, for example. So I've just got a few more points just to add to you, just to perhaps make you aware of how this actually affects your body. So for example, I think now in here we have 4G. We have 4G now here? Yeah. 4G is now all the way around the world. But just 30 minutes of exposure to 4G, so that means 30 minutes in the vicinity of a cell tower, 30 minutes in the Wi-Fi, 30 minutes on your telephone, which is easily done if you're talking to somebody that you know. 30 minutes of exposure to that affects not just the side of the brain where your phone is, it affects your full brain, it affects both sides. So for example, the left side of the brain is the reasoning side, it's the side that we use intellectually. The right side of the brain is linked to the heart. So even though most people listen on the left side, most people are right-handed, the automatic thing is you put it to the left side of your head. Sometimes you'll swap because you feel a bit irritated there, and you wonder why, and then you swap to the other side. But it doesn't matter which side of the head you put your phone on, you're affecting your full brain. There's a chart there on the wall, and the first image is a 5-year-old who has a very thin skull, 0.5 millimeter skull. Now, the white portion is the effect of the radiation on that child's brain. So that's a 5-year-old child, and it's affecting almost 100% of his brain. The next one is a 10-year-old child. Almost 2/3 of the brain are affected. And the next one is an adult with a skull thickness of 2 millimeters. So roughly 1/4 of the brain is affected by that. When you consider the difference between the adult and the child, and you see that every child seems to have a phone now and is constantly using the tablet or the mobile phone, can you imagine the amount of radiation that's penetrating their brains? You can't see it, you can't smell it, but it's there. So a study on typical student behavior was done recently in America, and they found that the students sent an average of 109 texts per day, and they received about 113 texts. Every time you send a text and every time you receive a text, there's an increase in the amount of radiation that your phone emits. It's like a spike, and it goes to the maximum. So that's 3,200 messages a month, one child, one student. Every time the message comes in, that's without talking on the phone. Every time the message comes in, that's the amount of radiation that's pulsing through their brain. Because they're touching the phone, and like the professor said, even the manufacturer's instructions say you must keep the phone 1 inch away from your body at all times. How can you use it if you're not supposed to touch it? And if you're not supposed to touch it, how can it be safe?
Near the heart.
Yeah, people put it next to their heart. That's what they're talking about, breast cancer. Women have got breast cancer in exactly the spot where they've put the phone in their bras. Men are getting cancer of the testes because they're putting their phones in their pockets. They're getting prostate cancer, infertility. Put it in the back. People are getting patches of cancer exactly where they're keeping their phones. But the point of the matter is that the manufacturers state in the small conditions that they don't print out anymore. You used to get the booklets. But if you go into your phone, you have to go way deep down to legal, disclaimers, safety. Finally, after searching, and who does that, it says you must keep this phone 1 inch away from your body. And they put that because then you can't go back to the company if you get brain cancer and it's proven it's in the shape, and they're coming in almost in shapes of where the cell phone is. You can't go to the company and say, your phone has given me brain cancer, because like he explained, they'll ask you, how did you use the phone? Oh, did you put it close to your head? Oh yes, I made a call like this. Oh, but our disclaimers say that you should keep it 1 inch away from your body. So that's the loophole in the law, so that they're not responsible. You're responsible. You're the only people who are responsible for your health and for the use of your mobiles. But what Ollie didn't speak about here was the increased rate of autism, and I just want to give a little bit of information on this because it's very relevant. Now, while I'm not saying that the use of cell phones and or wireless gadgets is the main cause of autism, it has been proven to be a contributory factor to the exponential increase in the rates of autism.
Yeah.
So one of the components that has been linked to the increase in autism has been vaccinations, because they have increased so quickly and so rapidly, and now in Europe the vaccines are mandatory. There are 11 vaccines mandatory for children under 3, and if they don't have them, they can't go to school. And these vaccines are containing chicken embryos, they're containing cultures that have been grown in monkey brains, they're containing genes from human embryos, aborted fetuses. They're using these in the vaccines. There's mercury, there's aluminium, there's all these nasty, nasty things that are not given to the parents. The parents don't get a list of ingredients. And all these have been a contributory factor with the electromagnetic radiation on the effects of the increase in the rates of autism. So, for example, in 1980, the rate of autism around the world was 1 in 10,000 children. So for every 10,000 children born, 1 would be autistic. When I was young, you didn't even hear of the word autism. You never heard of it, really. Maybe you heard it once in the 90s, or somebody's child was autistic, or what's that. But now, in America, it's 1 in 45 children. Since 1980, 1 in 45 children. And that increase goes alongside the increase in the introduction of cell phones, the introduction of wireless technology, the introduction of 3G, 4G, and it matches exactly on the charts. So it only, like we said, common sense. You see, one thing is increasing, and something else is increasing at the same rate. Isn't it true that possibly that is a matching component to the increase in the disease or the disability or whatever else? So I mentioned right at the beginning about ignorance of the medical industry with regards to the health effects of this wireless radiation. I don't know if they don't want to know, or if they know and they can't say, but certainly it's not really something that's taught when they're studying medicine, that this thing is dangerous, because it's relatively new. Really, only since the late 1990s have cell phones really started to become a household. Every individual has got one. I mean, for instance, in India, people can't afford shoes in the villages, they've got a cell phone. So this has got to tell you something about how much the industry wants people to have these appliances. And then maybe you could ask the question, why would they want everybody to have a cell phone? It's not for communication, it's for something else. Because if you've got a cell phone, it's reducing your cognitive abilities, you're using it all the time, you're exposed to the radiation, it's affecting how your brain works. And in fact, and I can't really go into that subject too much now because I don't have time for it, but there's the issue of mind control. And it has been proven, and they've been using the technology since the Cold War, since the late 60s, maybe even back to the 50s, where they use this radiation, this frequency, to control people's minds. They've effectively controlled groups of people. So they can have a group of people, they can pick on, for instance, a village. If they immerse that particular population in a specific frequency, they can alter the mood of those people. They can make them aggressive, they can make them calm, they can make them happy. It's a frequency for everything. We should know that. Everything works on a vibration, everything works on a frequency. The scientists also know this. The military also knows this, and they've been using this technology and refining it more and more for decades. So in the end, it's all about mind control. Now, if somebody else is controlling your mind, you're not controlling your own mind. And if you're not controlling your own mind, you're not conscious. You're going to be unable to develop from a spiritual perspective, because you won't even be able to think. You won't even be able to think to yourself, today I'm going to meditate. A thought won't be there, because you'll be so confused and so busy and so stressed. How can you even think to meditate when you're so stressed that you can't even function properly? So, one thing that Ollie mentioned was about some of the laws that have been brought in around the globe. Now, this presentation was 2014, I think. What happened in France, which is quite interesting, was actually in 2014 they brought a law, I think it was February or April 2014, in which no Wi-Fi is now allowed in creches, in kindergartens, in preschools, where children under the age of 3 are being looked after.
Here, guest house, first question, you have free Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Any restaurant, any guest houses?
Yes, yes. Everybody wants free Wi-Fi. I don't know why. This is the addiction part of it. Because immediately they, oh, I can't be without my Wi-Fi. But why? I understand that some people need to use technology for their businesses. But you go on a train, people carry the phone to the toilet with them. I mean, who's going to call you when you're on the toilet? Who would you want to speak to when you're on the toilet, for goodness sake? I'm not looking at anybody here, but I have heard other people talking in the bathroom. So, also in France, they've stopped the Wi-Fi in public libraries. Now, I know it's in Paris at the moment, I'm not sure about the rest of France, but in Paris definitely the Wi-Fi is not available in the public libraries. Which is good, it's for a reason that there needs to be spaces where people can go without being exposed to this. And this year, in France again, they're supposed to be, I hope that they continue to bring it out, because it was written in this previous law that this would be something that would progressively be introduced, that they will be banning the use of cell phones in all classrooms, in schools and colleges, and in all areas where children are gathered for educational reasons. Now that will be a good move, that will be a smart move, not use of the smartphones, this will be a smart move. How it will be implemented, I don't know, because all the students have phones, all the teachers have phones, so whether they would be able to implement the use of not using cell phones in classrooms, I don't know how it would work, but in principle it's a good idea. But in theory, the previous law about the under 3s, places where children aged 3 and below are being taken care of, Wi-Fi is not allowed. Doesn't common sense say that if that's the case, shouldn't that cover the home as well? But it doesn't, because as he expressed, common sense is lacking somehow. People see one part, they read only the part that they can then pass the buck to somebody else. So okay, they'll take their child to a kindergarten with no Wi-Fi for 3 hours in the morning. They'll bring the child home to spend another 18, 20 hours at home with the Wi-Fi on.
There's no.
So that's where that's going. And one last thing on the health impact. I mentioned earlier that also Alzheimer's has become a real big killer all over the world. Alzheimer's is a dementia. It's where dementia gets to the point where the person can't function any longer and they die. That is the leading cause of death in the UK now, Alzheimer's. I mentioned the bees are dying from Alzheimer's. Mental conditions, mental disorders. It's a disorder of functioning of the brain caused by electromagnetic radiation. In conjunction with Alzheimer's, also like autism, in conjunction with aluminium, in vaccines, and other nefarious things that are going on across the planet. In Europe, especially, you don't see it here, but the geoengineering that's happening, they're releasing billions of tons of aluminium, barium, strontium, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere of the planet, which is being dispersed all over the planet, even though you don't see the lines here. And it's this aluminium also that is affecting plants, it's affecting humans, and it collects in the brain. It's very difficult for us to detoxify from excessive heavy metals in the body. It is possible, you really have to work at it. So, from the perspective of mobile phones versus cordless telephones, people say, oh, I need my mobile, it's convenient, I can move around. 2 minutes communication on a mobile phone means 2 hours of intoxication. So for every 2 minutes you spend on the mobile phone, as Ollie showed, as this picture at the back here shows about the effects of blood cells of radiation from Wi-Fi. So for 2 minutes on your cell phone, you're going to get 2 hours of intoxication. That's like taking a drink of alcohol. And that's how long it takes for the alcohol to come out of your system. Imagine you're going to be like that. Your cells are going to be 2 hours after. Just 2 minutes. Now imagine how many times you use your cell phone in the day and how long it's close to your body, how long it's on, even when you're sleeping, under your phone, under your pillow, next to the bed. Wi-Fi router in the same room maybe. But with a corded telephone, normal telephone with a cable, you pick it up, okay, you have to use the phone where you're standing. 2 hours communication, it's over 2 hours, 0 intoxication.
Right.
Yeah, 0 intoxication. Same with the wide internet, the Ethernet connections. You use your wireless, same as the 2 minutes communication, 2 hours intoxication. For every 2 minutes that you're in the zone of your Wi-Fi, you're going to be intoxicated the whole time. Your Wi-Fi is on in your home 24 hours a day. Your body is not getting a chance to recover. But if you're using a cable, absolutely no problem. So when we talk about the health effects of wireless technology, we're not saying don't use technology. Technology is good. There's so much good that you can do with it, but you have to use it wisely. There is no need for us to be wireless. We have cables. We had cables when it first was invented. It doesn't look so pretty. We have cables here, but it's safer, much, much safer. So would you rather be safe or sorry? And when you're sorry, it's too late to say, I wish I'd been safe. So I'm going to move a little bit now. Shouldn't be too much longer, because I know it's been it's a long session. The video's a long video, but it's important information that's in there. Let's get back to the consciousness side, the consciousness aspect of the effect of electromagnetic radiation. So I did briefly mention at the start about the pineal gland. Now the pineal gland, imagine your head is here like this, the base of your spine is actually inside your skull, the base of your brain. Your brain is like a cashew nut. Imagine the cashew nut, and in the inner bend, in the middle is where your pineal gland is. That's our third eye. That's what they call the third eye, the seat of intuition. This point here, you go directly in, where you put your bindi, third eye. The direct line in is where you'll find your pineal gland. This is what they depicted as being our third eye. Now, it's not only the seat of intuition, it's like a little antenna. It's our spiritual antenna, and that is why it was called the third eye. Like we have 2 eyes that we can see outwardly. This is the eye that we can see inside, which is up or in or down or wherever we imagine everything else is. This is our little antenna to view everything else, to feel everything else, to gain our knowledge, to gain our spirits for our connection with the divine. And the pineal glands are being calcified. The scientists have proved in Alzheimer's patients especially, when they've done autopsies on the brains of Alzheimer's patients, they found that the pineal glands have been calcified. When we say calcified, it's like a layer, this crust has formed all the way around the outside of that gland, like the shell of a cashew nut. It's calcified, it's blocked. So nothing's getting in and nothing's getting out. One of the other functions, a very, very important function of the pineal gland, is that it provides one of our most essential substances as a human being. It provides melatonin. Now, melatonin is what our brain, what the pineal gland secretes at night. You shut off the lights, you close your eyes. During that process of sleep, when you're in darkness, our body produces a chemical called melatonin, and it's this melatonin which allows the body to repair itself. That's why we sleep, because our body is repairing itself. However, wireless technology and the electromagnetic radiation blocks that process of melatonin secretion. Now, if your body's not secreting its repair mechanism, it can't repair. So the cumulative effects of the radiation continue to degrade the cells, continually killing the cells, continually breaking DNA, continually making damage to your skin, to your eyesight, to your brain cells. And there's nothing being produced that can repair that. The immune system also, yeah. And so by blocking the secretion of melatonin and by blocking our internal antenna, essentially what's happening is our bodies are being forcibly sent into a state of degeneration. Because we're not repairing, the only thing that can happen is for our bodies to degenerate. So one of the typical signs of overexposure to radiation is it ages people. People start to look older than they are. You notice outside people look tired, a little grey, they've got wrinkles. Part of that is because of this exposure to the radiation. So I want to talk a little bit about the addictive side of this technology, because this also has a root in the consciousness aspect, as I see it. And one of the main problems that somebody who has an addiction to any substance, to drink, to cigarettes, to this technology, is there's a fear at the cause. The root of all of these things, when you tell somebody, okay, you shouldn't smoke, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't use your cell phones, when you tell them that there's something wrong with what they're doing, one of the reasons that they can't stop is because there's a deep-seated fear in there somewhere. For example, me with cigarettes, there's a fear, okay, if I stop the cigarettes, how am I going to cope with everything else? Because this is like my little pickup, you know, if I'm feeling stressed, I'll take a cigarette, I feel better. Or if I stop the cigarettes, when I get stressed, how am I going to deal with that? And this is something I'm working on constantly, because I understand the health issues of cigarettes. I stopped once and then I restarted stupidly. I understand that, and I know that there is a problem. It's the same with alcohol. We know there is a problem with alcohol, but what we are finding now is that there is a problem with the cell phones, there's a problem with the wireless technologies, there's a problem with the radiation, but there isn't this we know yet. Some of us we know, and so we don't use. I don't have a cell phone, I don't use a cell phone, I don't use Wi-Fi. But for instance, with the cigarettes, I know it's bad for my health, and I continue to smoke, and I know that if I don't stop, what's worse than being ignorant to the fact that something is bad for you is knowing that it's bad for you, but choosing to ignore that. That will block my progress. I know that's something that will block my progress. But I also know that this is a big hurdle for me to conquer, and that if I can conquer this, then most of my other little things, obviously there are plenty, everybody has plenty of things to rise over, but most of the other big topics, I should say, have been covered. I've managed to, one by one, slowly take control of those things. Hopefully this will be the last big hurdle to go through. So, when we talk about fear, probably getting a little bit disjointed here now, because even all this technology here is, I can feel my body buzzing from the sockets, starting to lose the train of thought a little. So I'll just keep going, and if it doesn't make sense, we'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah.
But fear is the root of all what we call dis-ease. So when you're not at ease, you're at dis-ease. But when we talk about dis-ease, we also use the word disease, because the word disease, illness, is simply dis-ease. The mother talks very much about dis-ease of the body. It's not an illness, it's something that's not happy, not coordinated, it's not tranquil, it's not peaceful. So when you live in fear, you can never achieve peace. You can't. If you're afraid, you'll never be peaceful. Whether it's you're afraid of snakes coming in your garden every night, so every night you're not peaceful because there might be a snake. You're constantly going to be, you're not going to be peaceful. You're afraid of mosquitoes, or the mosquitoes will come, maybe I'll get TB, or maybe I'll get malaria. So all night you'll be, oh, it's going to bite me, am I going to get sick? It's fear. You're not going to be peaceful. Fear is behind nearly every single bad feeling and ill will. When you look at, for example, jealousy, jealousy is a thing in itself, but if you look at why is somebody jealous, it's usually because they're afraid of not having enough love, not having enough things, not being popular. And the jealousy comes because somebody else has love, somebody else has the things, somebody else is popular. The jealousy becomes through their own fear of not having that. That's where the jealousy comes from. It's the same with greed, it's a fear of not having enough. It's not just I want. Behind, deep behind is the fear, if I don't take this, I won't have enough. So pain is also often a manifestation of a hidden fear. The Chinese medicine say there are many books on the subject where, for instance, if you have pain in your kidneys, or you have pain in your stomach or your shoulder, it can be attributed to some deep-rooted fear, some deep-rooted memory even of something that can cause the pain. So deep behind nearly everything that's bad, if you really search, you'll be able to find something that somebody's afraid of. It might just be a small thing. It might even be something from when they were a child that they would never remember, but that fear is still there in the subconscious. So subconsciously, there is a fear behind the addiction to technology. Because if you were, for example, I don't have this problem because I don't have a cell phone, but for somebody who has a cell phone, how many times do you think to yourself, for example now, how many times have you thought during the last 2 hours, I wonder if somebody's called, I wonder if I've got a message, maybe it's important, maybe I missed some work. It's a fear, you're not peaceful because you'll be thinking, in the back of your mind, I should check, maybe somebody called me. Or, if like me, to let go of that technology, there's the fear of being considered to be a bit strange. Well, she doesn't have a cell phone. Strange. But for a lot of people that would be a problem. You might be fearful that, okay, if I stop using my cell phone, what are people going to think about me? So it's a natural human thought. What is other people going to think about me if I do this, which is not in the normal flow of everything? You might be afraid if you were to not use your cell phone, or if you were to put your cell phone in flight mode most of the day, you might be afraid that you're going to lose some friends, you're going to lose some work. Because in this day and age, somebody sends you a text message, there's such an urgency for a reply. I used to use a mobile phone, I know how it works. You send a message, 3 seconds later, what, no reply? You send another message. What, are you too busy to talk to me? The aggression is already there, just because you've sent a message to someone and they've not replied straight away. Whoa, who are you? You're not replying to me. Another 5 minutes, they don't respond to the second message.
Yes.
Oh, then they call. Well, I'm not talking to them now. So easy for these things to happen because people are so tied up on this urgency for you must do it now, you must do it now. If you don't reply, you don't like me. You don't care about my feelings. And also there's the fear about safety. But I understand the fear about safety, I really do. I mean, I've travelled from France. There are no public telephone boxes anymore in France. I haven't seen a public telephone box here in Kurupalium anymore. There used to be one. What happens? Yeah, so what happens if I have an accident and I'm by myself? Well, the same thing that happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when there were no mobile phones. We manage. We manage. Okay, it's not an ideal situation, but it was an ideal situation in those days. It was just the accepted norm. We didn't worry, we didn't have this fear of not being able to call somebody if we had an accident. Because the technology didn't exist, so that fear didn't exist. So this technology is actually promoting these fears. It's making us dependent, which is part of the control that I talked about before, not just mind control. Control over us, the way we think. Everything is making us fearful that if we don't have this technology, if we don't do these things, we're going to lose ourselves. When in actual fact, by doing all these things, by having all this technology, we're losing ourselves. So, I did mention right at the beginning a little bit on the force that I personally, and not just me, there are many out there on YouTube, truth media if you like, there are many people who are spiritually inclined, who are coming to the similar conclusion. Maybe it's just that sometimes when you think of something, when you have this intuition, only then do you suddenly begin to find other people with the same ideas or thoughts. It's like anything. It could just be that I found them only after I got my intuition, because that's the only time then that they are shared and I become aware of their presence. But there are more and more people who are talking about this concept of the devil behind all that's happening in the world, and we call it the devil, but in the integral yoga it's the lord of falsehood, the lord of nations, the adverse forces. Whatever we want to call it, it's still the same thing. It's contrary to the truth. It's that fights us. It's that stops us from bringing down the light. It's that stops us from reaching inside to release our soul, connecting back with the one. I don't know if many people would be aware, it depends if you have read the agenda or not, but Mother actually had a conversation with this entity many years before. This entity that she called the Lord of Nations. And when she had this conversation with him, we'll call him him, just to put sex on it because we need to do that in our world, but this entity said to her that he knew he wouldn't win. He knew he wouldn't win. He won't win. But he's going to create as much chaos as possible before he leaves. Now, I feel personally that this is that time. This is the time of this great chaos. It's because it's just been spiraling so quickly. We didn't have electricity at the beginning of the 1900s, it just started to come in. So in the last 120 years, we've gone like this, up skywards into stupidity with the technological advances and everything else that's gone. It's gone so quickly, and just in the last, I would say the last 5-10 years, the last 5 years actually, the advancements in technology from GSM, used to be just GSM for your telephones, to 2G, to 3G, to 4G, now next year's 5G. Everything is speeding up. The GMOs, the geoengineering, everything, all these things is just speeding up and speeding up more and more and more and more and more until finally, well, we don't know. We can hope for what will finally arrive, but there are a number of people, and I sincerely would recommend that you search these people out on YouTube if you really want to see the devil in action, because these guys, when you watch their presentations, when you watch how they speak, when you listen to what they say, and when you watch their facial expressions when they're saying it, it really is like watching the devil in disguise. And they're all linked to all these things that are happening around the world, the geoengineering, the transhumanism agenda, which is about humans slowly becoming more and more technological, finally to the point that we will be no longer conscious human beings, we will be robots in a human form. One of these guys is called Tom Wheeler. Now, I don't know if you know much about 5G that's coming, but it's not simply an increase in the speed of the technological downflow. It's not. It's got nothing to do with that. That is one aspect of it, but the reason that the 5G is coming into play is to allow the integration of the Internet of Things, which will basically connect all technological gadgets into what they call the cloud. It literally is the cloud. What they're spraying with all the nanoparticles, that's the cloud. It's just very, very, you can't really see it here in India, but in Europe now, the sky is no longer blue. You don't see a blue sky, it's like a misty blue. It's not really vivid blue anymore. So he talks about 5G, and really, you need to see him to believe him, but he's just, he basically tells you that 5G will be implemented. They're not going to test it. Why should they bother wasting their time? They know it works. And it's going to cover every single corner of the globe because it makes billions and billions of dollars, and that's what counts. So check out Tom Wheeler if you can find him. Another one is the
John Wheeler, no?
Tom Wheeler.
Tom Wheeler.
Yeah. Another guy is David Heath, and he's linked with geoengineering. He's the one that thinks it's safe to spray billions of tons of sulfur dioxide and aluminum and barium and strontium into the atmosphere, knowing that what goes up must come down, and admitting that they haven't tested the long-term effects on human life, even though they've been spraying since the 60s. And the other guy is Ray Kurzweil. Now he's the one that's linked with the transhumanism element of all this. They're all linked together in one way or another. But then the only name that came to mind after I'd written these three down was Hitler.
Hitler.
So we all know what happened with him, with Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So need I say more? All I see when I see these people is I just feel it deep down inside that they're coming from the Atlas force, and this is the force that's pushing. They are puppets, of course. This is the force that is behind them all. What we need to do is we need to apply wisdom to everything. We need to try and apply wisdom to everything. We need to use our power. We have a power as people. If only we listen, instead of using our egos and saying, oh, this is wrong, I don't want to listen to this, what does she know about this subject? Okay, I'm not professing to be an expert, I'm simply muddling and put together some information to get at least a little drop of consciousness out there. Enough for people to start to research for themselves, because the information is there. There's plenty of it. You can't dispute the facts.
Yeah.
You can't dispute the facts. And you can't dispute your own intuition. And that's the reason why I'm talking the way I'm talking, because I feel my intuition, I feel it's strong, and I know it's not just coming from me, from my own personal experiences over the last 4 years. Only if we apply our wisdom, use our power, are we going to be able to keep our peace? And only if we are able to keep our peace are we going to be able to maintain any kind of harmony. Because right now we don't have a lot of harmony going on. So I'm coming right to the end, slowly but surely. So as I said, it got a bit muddled somewhere in the middle there. I'm just going to use 4 words because they all begin with the same thing, but they all have completely different meanings. So the first word is transcendence, which means to go beyond this reality. Now Buddha worked for transcendence. That was Buddha's work. He worked to transcend. He went outside. Now, in the world, especially in the West, we have the word transgender has become the big issue. Now they're saying that children as old as the age of 4 should be allowed to decide whether they're a girl or a boy. How can a child at the age of 4 understand the concept of that? They just know that they've been born as a girl or they've been born as a boy. But I have some literature that is here which explains the hormonal effects of the electromagnetic pollution as well. So that might answer some questions, as it did for me, on the subject of transgenderism. Of course, there are people who are naturally gay. I respect everybody. But this explosion of transgenderism and this pushing of small children to be taught in schools how they can express if they're a girl or a boy, I'm sorry, but that's not natural. That's not natural. The children should be left to develop for themselves. And when they're old enough, when they have enough knowledge, then they can express. But they shouldn't be forced. And they shouldn't be given opportunities for parents at birth, in my opinion, to decide if they should register their child as girl or a boy or as neutral gender. Naturally speaking, you have a girl, you can tell it's a girl. You have a boy, you can tell it's a boy. But now, no, we're all going into this transgenderism, and that has a lot to do with the hormonal imbalances that are being caused by the chemicals, by the radiation, and many other factors. So that's transgender. The other word being used now is transhumanism, which is to go beyond human, which means to go beyond human technologically, not total evolution. What's happening now, yeah, Superman. But they're using this same word, the Lord of Nations, the adverse forces. They're mirroring the work of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. If you look at it from that perspective, you could look at it from many other religious perspectives as well, but from one doing the integral yoga, I hear these words, I've seen, okay, I've heard that word somewhere. I think Sri Aurobindo used the word Superman. Then you hear Ray Kurzweil talking about the Superman mirrored. And many other things that go along with the transhumanism agenda. But the most important one is transformation, to go beyond form, which is not transhumanism, it's not transgender, it's not transcendence. We're not going beyond this reality, we're not going beyond gender, we're not going beyond human, we're going beyond form, which is different. Yeah. It's the falsehood that's working towards going beyond reality, beyond gender, and beyond human in a manufactured way, not in the terms that we speak of in the yoga. So I have some other things, but maybe I'll save that for another day. So I'll finish with, that's my last bit. So now you know some truths about the technology, some truths about the health effects of the electromagnetic frequencies. As I say, there are some papers and flyers, there's lots of information here, but just not possible to fit it all into one session, I mean, this session is long enough, but imagine to try to fit all this information together, it's not possible. You must take time to research, you must take time to read on the subject if you really want to know, if you really value your health, if you value the health of your children, your loved ones, your friends, your families, if as a spiritual being you value the health of every living organism on the planet, you really must do some research to try and understand, just to open your eyes a little bit. And then in your own way, you can take your own steps to reduce your own exposition to this dangerous technology. Make sure when you have your telephone with you, you keep it on flight mode unless it's of the absolute utmost urgency. Schedule times with people to call. Schedule meetings using the internet, using your computer with a wide connection. By all means, send text messages, but choose a couple of times in the day, maybe in the morning, maybe at lunchtime, maybe in the evening, just half an hour. You turn your phone on, you collect your messages, you read them, compile your responses, you send your responses, check your emails, half an hour, read, respond. Schedule things as we used to. When you used to make an appointment with somebody, you had to be there. There was no way to phone them with a mobile phone and say, oh, I'm a bit late, or I can't make it, or... No, you made an appointment, you were there. It gave you that incentive to really progress. You were able to progress. It just gave you a sense of values. We're losing our values. Time, other people's time is irrelevant these days because it's so easy to just tell them, oh, I'm not coming, or I'll be late. I even had a friend when I was in Hyderabad. He was sitting eating lunch with me, with the food had just come. Somebody called him, oh yes, I'm on my way, I'll be there in 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
But the food's just come, oh no, it's okay. But it's so easy to do that because the mobile was there. But if he didn't have the mobile, he probably wouldn't have ordered the food because he would say, no, I have to go.
More lights have come.
Yeah. So, now you know there's some truths about this technology. A couple of questions for you. Will you choose to ignore it for the sake of convenience? Or will you try to at least make a few changes? I know people who found it difficult at first. I have friends who've made an effort to change their habits, to turn off their phones at night. And now that they're also aware that you can turn the phone into flight mode, it doesn't mean you can't use the functions on the phone. You can use the alarm clock, you can use your camera, you can listen to your music, you can read your literature that's on there. The only difference is that you're not going to get any calls and the radiation is not flowing to and from your phone all night long while you're trying to sleep and while your body needs to produce melatonin to recover from the day's stresses. At least if you have a good night's sleep away from that radiation, when you're outside during the day, your hours and hours of exposition, at least your body has a chance to recover in some way, shape or form. So, I know it's hard to detach. I know there's an addiction to these phones. I know the reasons why people, now that they're addicted, are going to find it difficult to release, to surrender, to let go of the technology, even just a little bit. But we need to conquer these fears and understand, literally, I would say 99.9% of the times, turning your phone off is not going to cause somebody to die. So the only person that is likely to die if you don't switch it off is yourself. And I say that with sincerity, that if we continue to use this technology day in, day out, 24/7, within the next 20 years, every single one of you will know of somebody who has died because of use of the cell phone, because of a brain tumour, because of in French we call it an ABC, a burst blood vessel that causes a stroke. Every single one of you will know somebody that's had a heart attack, or has breast cancer, or has testicular cancer, is infertile. Within the next 20 years, we'll all know somebody who suffers from autism. We can guarantee we have 7 people in this room by 2025 it's predicted that 1 in every 4 people will be born with autism. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Shouldn't you stand up? So in a group, you have amongst a group just this size, you add 1 more person standing up, will be autistic. And they're saying that because it affects men, males, more than females, that will equate to 1 in every 2 boys that are born out of those 1 in 4 will be autistic. And that's no kind of society to live in, because it's a stress not only on society itself, financially, the financial burden of taking care of people with autism, but it's the emotional stress on the people who have to take care of them, the parents, the families, everybody around them. So imagine you have your house with 1 autistic child, your neighbours have an autistic child, your neighbours have an autistic child. That's an awful lot of suffering, not only for you, but also for the child that's autistic, that's trapped inside their own little bodies. So, I know it's hard to detach, because even to use the technology wisely seems like it's too much hard work. I'll switch it off, switch it on, switch it off, switch it on. With these wires, when I can't move around, because if I have the phone with the cable, how am I going to stand at the other side of the room? I'll have to put it down when I get a pen. I know it's difficult, but what you need to ask yourself is, are you going to, now that you have some information, you know it's dangerous, you know what some of the effects are you going to deceive yourself and the divine, or will you at least make an effort to change your habits? It's not ignorance that stops people from taking action, it's bad will. Thank you.
Thank on behalf of Arts Foundation, Louise, a beautiful presentation. Very nice research. She has been telling many interesting and new things on Wi-Fi, modern technology. Already phone has a lot of disturbance, misunderstanding, so many things going on. So very nice presentation. The first film, fantastic.